A black boy is beaten for fixing a Hell's Angel bike. But what happens the next day shocks an entire town. He was just trying to help, a stranger broken down on the side of the road. But one small act of kindness turns his life into a nightmare. That night, he's attacked, left bloody and broken, for showing compassion to the wrong person. Then, as the town wakes up, the ground begins to shake. 200 roaring engines, leather jackets, tattoos, every biker in the county rolling in, for him. They didn't come for revenge, at least not the kind anyone expected. Now the whole town is watching, and fear turns to confusion when Rough Riders start rebuilding what hate tried to destroy. But behind the smoke and chrome, secrets burn hotter than any fire. Will mercy heal the wounds of a broken town? Or will hate strike again before the engines go silent? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The Mississippi sun beat down mercilessly on the tin roof of Kevin Matthews' garage, making the metal crackle and pop in protest. Inside, gospel music floated from an old radio perched on a workbench, its gentle rhythms mixing with the metallic clinks of tools against engine parts. At 22 years old, Kevin had already earned a reputation in town for his gifted hands and generous heart. Lying on his back under a rusty Ford pickup, sweat dotting his dark skin, Kevin hummed along with the radio as he worked. The concrete floor felt cool against his shoulder blades, offering small relief from the thick humidity that hung in the air like a heavy blanket. His weathered toolbox lay within arm's reach, each wrench and socket carefully arranged, a habit his late father had instilled in him. "Kevin," his mother's voice carried across the backyard. "Come get some sweet tea, baby." He slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on the red shop rag tucked into his back pocket. The summer heat hit him full force as he stepped out of the garage's shade. Ruth Matthews stood on their back porch, a tall glass of sweet tea sweating in her hand. Her face held that familiar mix of pride and worry he'd grown used to seeing. "Coming, Mama?" he called back, crossing the patchy grass between the garage and house. The screen door creaked as he stepped onto the porch. His mother handed him the glass, ice cubes clinking invitingly. "That Morrison boy's daddy came by the church again," Ruth said, settling into her favorite wooden rocker. "Said you fixed their tractor last week and wouldn't take no payment." Kevin sipped his tea, letting the sweetness wash away the taste of metal and grease. "They're having a hard time since Mrs. Morrison got sick. Didn't feel right taking their money." Ruth's face softened, but concern still creased her brow. "You got to be careful who you help, son. Folks around here don't like change." She rocked slowly, the chair's familiar squeak punctuating her words. "They see a young black man doing good. Some of them can't handle it. Makes them question things they'd rather leave alone." "Mama," Kevin said gently, "kindness always wins in the end. That's what you taught me." He touched her shoulder softly. "That's what Dad believed too." Ruth shook her head, but a small smile played at her lips. "You got your daddy's heart, that's for sure, just like him, seeing the best in everybody." The afternoon wore on, and Kevin returned to his work, the conversation with his mother turning over in his mind like an engine that wouldn't quite catch. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when he finally finished with the pickup, his shirt damp with honest work. As he was cleaning up his tools, a strange sound caught his attention, a deep rumbling followed by silence, then a sharp pop and hiss. Kevin stepped out of the garage and spotted a column of smoke rising above the tree line along Route 7. Without hesitation, he grabbed his emergency toolbox and jumped into his own truck, a well-worn Chevy that had seen better days, but still ran true thanks to his careful maintenance. The engine turned over with a familiar growl, and he headed toward the smoke. The scene he found by the roadside wasn't what he expected. A woman in worn leather stood next to a beautiful but clearly troubled Harley-Davidson, her colorful language cutting through the evening air. Her vest bore patches Kevin didn't recognize, but the set of her shoulders and the way she carried herself spoke of someone used to commanding respect, or demanding it. "Stupid piece of," she was muttering as Kevin pulled up, her voice trailing off as she sized him up with sharp eyes. "Evening, ma'am," Kevin said softly, stepping out of his truck. "Having some trouble?" The woman, who he'd later learn was Amanda Bulldog Harlan, straightened up, her stance guarded but not hostile. "Nothing I can't handle," she said gruffly, though the frustration in her voice suggested otherwise. Kevin noticed the way she favored her right leg, probably tired from trying to kickstart the bike. The sun was getting lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Moths had started their evening dance around the few streetlights that dotted this stretch of road. "Mind if I take a look?" he offered, keeping his distance until invited closer. "I work on engines, all kinds." Amanda studied him for a long moment, her weathered face unreadable. Finally, she stepped aside with a gesture that managed to be both graceful and grudging. "Have at it. But if you mess her up more than she already is, we're gonna have words." Kevin approached the bike slowly, reverently. It was a beautiful machine, despite its current troubles. He could see right away that someone had put a lot of love into maintaining it. The chrome still gleamed where it wasn't covered in road dust. As he began his inspection, working with quiet efficiency, he could feel Amanda watching his every move. Her presence was strong, like a thundercloud waiting to break, but Kevin stayed focused on his task. His hands moved with practiced ease, checking connections, testing parts, listening to the bike's story told through its mechanical symptoms. The evening air grew cooler as he worked, crickets beginning their nightly chorus in the nearby grass. Finally, he found what he was looking for and reached for his toolbox. The final bolt needed just the right touch, not too tight, not too loose. As he made the adjustment, he could sense Amanda moving closer, her curiosity seemingly getting the better of her initial wariness. The last turns of the wrench felt right under his hands, that perfect resistance that told him the job was done properly. In the fading light, Kevin straightened up slowly, wiping his hands clean as Amanda watched him with an expression that had shifted from skepticism to something closer to respect. The morning sun painted golden stripes across Kevin's garage floor as he organized his tools, still thinking about the mysterious biker from the night before. The rumble of a motorcycle made him look up, and there she was. Amanda, steering her Harley into his driveway with the confidence of someone who'd been riding their whole life. She killed the engine and swung off the bike in one fluid motion, pulling a thick envelope from her jacket pocket. "Kid, you saved my hide last night. Here's what I owe you." Kevin wiped his hands on a shop rag and smiled, shaking his head. "Ma'am, you don't owe me anything. You needed help? That's payment enough." Amanda's eyebrows shot up, creating new lines on her weathered face. "Nobody does anything for free these days." She studied him with those sharp eyes that seemed to catch everything. "Let me at least buy you breakfast. I know a place." Before Kevin could protest, she added with a grin, "And I ain't taking no for an answer this time." The Bell's Diner sat at the corner of Main and Oak, its neon sign flickering even in broad daylight. As they walked in, the usual morning chatter died down to whispers. Kevin felt the stares but kept his head high, following Amanda to a booth by the window. "Coffee black," Amanda told the waitress, who seemed uncertain whether to look at her or not. "And whatever my friend here wants." "Morning, Sally," Kevin said warmly to the waitress. "I'll have the usual, please." Sally nodded quickly and hurried away. Around them, the whispers continued like rustling leaves. "They always this friendly?" Amanda asked dryly, watching an elderly couple at the counter deliberately turn their backs. Kevin chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. "Oh, you should see them on Sundays after church." Their food arrived, pancakes for Kevin, eggs and bacon materializing in front of Amanda, despite her only ordering coffee. The conversation flowed easier than either expected, and soon Kevin found himself sharing his dreams. "I want to open my own place," he said, pushing syrup around his plate with a fork. "Call it Fixing Hearts. Sounds silly maybe, but I figure everybody deserves a chance to get back on the road, you know? No matter who they are or what they can pay." Amanda set down her coffee cup, something soft passing across her usually hard features. "Ain't silly at all, kid. World needs more of that kind of thinking." She paused, considering. "My crew rides through here every few months. Next time I'll bring them by. Could help you set up proper, maybe teach you a thing or two about bikes." Kevin's face lit up. "That'd be amazing, ma'am. Thank you." As they finished their meal, the diner's other patrons had moved from whispers to obvious glares. Amanda noticed everything, the way the cook kept watching from the kitchen window, how people clutched their purses tighter when they walked past. Outside, Amanda mounted her bike, then turned to Kevin. "You be careful, kid. Some folks don't take kindly to people who make them question their ways." Kevin nodded, but his smile remained genuine. "Safe travels, Ms. Amanda." He watched her ride away, the Harley's engine echoing down Main Street long after she'd disappeared from view. When he returned home, his mother was waiting on the porch, worry etched into her face. "I saw you at Bell's," Ruth said softly. "With that woman." "She's good people, Mama, just needed help." Ruth touched his cheek, her eyes filling with tears. "Baby, you can't feed peace to people who only want fear. This town, it ain't ready for your kind of kindness." Kevin wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. "Someone's got to try, Mama. That's what you always taught me." The day passed quietly after that. Kevin worked until sunset, fixing Mrs. Johnson's station wagon and Mr. Peterson's lawnmower. The radio kept him company, gospel music mixing with the sound of his tools against metal. He was just closing up when he heard them, multiple engines, too loud and aggressive to be regular customers. Truck tires crunched on gravel as 3 vehicles pulled up outside the garage. The men who stepped out wore masks, but Kevin recognized Bobby Ray Jenkins's voice immediately. "Well, look who's still open for business." Kevin's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "Evening, gentlemen. I'm actually closing up now." "Shut up," one of the men spat, moving closer. "Think you can disrespect our town? Bringing trash like that through here?" They surrounded him, 5 masked figures in the growing darkness. Kevin raised his hands. "Now, fellas." The first punch caught him in the stomach, driving the air from his lungs. He doubled over, gasping, as more blows rained down. They knocked him to the ground, boots finding his ribs, his back, his face. Through the pain, Kevin heard their slurs, their angry words about knowing his place and teaching him a lesson. He curled into himself, protecting his head as best he could. When they finally stopped, the night had grown fully dark. Kevin lay in the dirt beside his mother's house, tasting blood, every breath a struggle. From inside the garage, his radio still played softly. Amazing Grace, drifting out into the darkness like a bitter prayer. The first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, but Ruth Matthews couldn't appreciate its beauty. She'd been up all night, worry gnawing at her when Kevin hadn't come in for dinner. The morning dew soaked through her house slippers as she walked toward the garage, calling his name. "Kevin?" Baby, you out here?" The sight that greeted her stopped her heart. Kevin lay crumpled in the dirt, his work shirt torn and stained dark with blood. His face was swollen, barely recognizable. "Oh, Jesus, no!" Ruth's scream shattered the morning quiet. She fell to her knees beside him, hands hovering over his broken body, afraid to touch and cause more pain. "Kevin, someone help. Please, somebody help my boy." Mr. Johnson from next door came running, still in his pajamas. Together they got Kevin into Ruth's old Buick. She drove to County General with shaking hands, running every stop sign on the way. The emergency room buzzed with quiet efficiency as doctors worked on Kevin. Ruth paced the waiting room, her prayers a constant whisper. "Lord, please, please don't take my baby." Dr. Morris finally emerged, looking grave. "He's stable, Mrs. Matthews. 3 broken ribs, a concussion, multiple contusions. We'll keep him overnight for observation." Sheriff Dale Harkins arrived while Ruth was signing insurance papers she knew she couldn't afford. He stood awkwardly in his pressed uniform, hat in hands. "Mrs. Matthews, I came as soon as I heard." He cleared his throat. "Though I should tell you up front, without any witnesses or evidence." Ruth's voice could have cut steel. "Evidence? My son is lying in there looking like he went through a meat grinder. That's your evidence, Dale Harkins." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Ruth, you know how these things go. Could have been a bar fight, could have been those same boys who've been causing trouble since they were in diapers," Ruth interrupted. "But you won't do nothing about it, will you? Just like you didn't do nothing when they burned crosses in the Wilsons' yard last summer." Kevin's weak voice drifted from the hospital room. "Mama?" Ruth hurried to his bedside, tears flowing freely as she saw his battered face in the harsh hospital light. His right eye was swollen shut, lips split and puffy. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." She touched his hand gently. Sheriff Harkins followed, notebook ready. "Son, if you could tell me who did this?" Kevin's unswollen eye focused on the sheriff. Even through the pain, his voice was steady. "Wouldn't matter if I did, would it?" He managed a small smile that must have hurt. "Besides, hate isn't going to fix anything." Ruth wiped her eyes. "Kevin Matthews, you stop that right now. These people tried to kill you. And naming names won't make them see different, Mama." Kevin closed his eye, exhausted. "It'll just give them more reason to hate." 500 miles away, in Austin, Texas, Amanda Bulldog Harlan was enjoying her morning coffee when her phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Sally from Bell's Diner. "This better be good, Sally. It's barely 8 o'clock." "Amanda, you need to see this." Sally's voice shook. "It's all over Facebook. That sweet boy who fixed your bike? They beat him half to death last night." Amanda's coffee cup crashed to the floor. "What?" "I'm sending you the link now. The paper's calling it an altercation. But the video— oh God, the video!" Amanda's hands trembled as she opened the local news website. The headline read, "Local mechanic involved in late-night altercation." The article was 3 paragraphs of carefully worded nothing, but the shaky cell phone video below told the real story. She watched in horror as 5 masked men surrounded Kevin, heard the sickening thuds of boots meeting flesh, heard Kevin's quiet prayers even as they beat him. Her fist slammed down on the bar counter so hard the wood cracked. "Joey," she bellowed, "get the crew together, now!" Within 30 minutes, 20 leather-clad bikers filled the bar. Amanda stood before them, phone displayed. "This boy helped me when my bike broke down. Wouldn't take a dime for it. Now look what they did to him." The video played. Curses filled the air. "We ride at dawn tomorrow," Amanda declared, her voice steel. "Anyone who wants to sit this out, Speak now." Silence answered her. Then Preacher, their oldest member, stood up. "Matthew 25, verse 40, he rumbled. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." "Amen," someone whispered. In his hospital bed, Kevin drifted in and out of consciousness, unaware of the thunder gathering in Texas. Dawn was breaking again as Amanda and her crew fired up their bikes, the roar of 20 engines splitting the morning air. They pointed their front wheels north, toward Mississippi, Justice riding with them like an unseen passenger. 2 days passed like molasses in winter. The town held its breath, pretending nothing had happened while Kevin Matthews lay recovering in his hospital bed. But at exactly 10:15 in the morning, the ground began to tremble. At first, people thought it was a freight train, but the rumble grew deeper, more threatening, like thunder rolling up from the earth itself. Mrs. Peterson at the flower shop dropped her watering can. Old Mr. Jenkins at the hardware store stepped outside, squinting down Main Street. Then they appeared, 200 motorcycles, chrome flashing in the Mississippi sun, riding 2 by 2 down the narrow streets. Their leather cuts bore the dreaded Death's Head patch of the Hells Angels. The formation stretched for blocks, their engines speaking in one voice that rattled windows and set dogs to barking. Curtains twitched in every house. Mothers hurried children inside. Shop owners turned their open signs to closed. The town had never seen anything like this. The hospital parking lot filled quickly as the bikers pulled in with military precision. Their machines lined up like soldiers at attention, chrome pipes still ticking from the long ride. Amanda Bulldog Harlan killed her engine first, the sudden silence more intimidating than the noise had been. She removed her helmet, revealing eyes hard as flint. Her leather vest creaked as she walked purposefully through the hospital's automatic doors, ignoring the security guard who seemed unsure whether to stop her or run. Ruth Matthews was dozing in the chair beside Kevin's bed when Amanda appeared in the doorway. She jerked awake with a gasp, instinctively moving between the biker and her son. "Mrs. Matthews," Amanda said softly, removing her riding gloves. "I'm the woman your son helped on the road last week." Without waiting for a response, she moved to Kevin's bedside and knelt, her weathered face softening at the sight of his injuries. "You fixed more than my bike that night," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You fixed my soul. Now we're here to fix this town." Kevin, pale but alert, tried to sit up straighter. His good eye widened as he looked past Amanda to his window. The parking lot below was a sea of motorcycles and leather-clad figures standing in silent formation. "I don't understand," he whispered. "You showed kindness to a stranger," Amanda replied. "That's rare enough these days. But you did it knowing some folks wouldn't like it, and you did it anyway. Then those same folks tried to beat the goodness out of you." She stood up, her shadow falling across his bed. "Well, they're about to learn that goodness has teeth." Sheriff Dale Harkins burst into the room, his face flushed. "Now see here." Amanda turned to face him, calm as a rattlesnake. "Sheriff, I was wondering when you'd show up." "This is a peaceful town," Harkins began, but Amanda cut him off. "Peaceful?" She pulled out her phone, called up the video of Kevin's beating. "This what you call peaceful?" The sheriff's face reddened further as the sounds filled the small room, the thuds of boots, the slurs, Kevin's quiet prayers. "We're not here for trouble," Amanda said, her voice level but carrying an edge of steel. "We're here for justice. These 200 people behind me, they rode from 5 states to stand with this young man, because that's what decent folks do when they see wrong being done." Harkins adjusted his gun belt nervously. "I can't have 200 bikers camping out in my town." "Then solve the crime, Sheriff. Do your job, because we're not leaving until you do." By evening, News vans had arrived from Jackson and Memphis. Cameras captured the surreal scene. Grizzled bikers sharing coffee with nurses, helping elderly patients navigate the parking lot, keeping respectful vigil. The story was spreading. Hell's Angels protect beaten black mechanic. As the sun began to set, Kevin insisted on going outside. Amanda and Ruth helped him into a wheelchair, careful of his ribs. The evening air was warm and thick with honeysuckle as they rolled him through the hospital doors. 200 bikers snapped to attention. Kevin's voice trembled but carried clearly in the hushed parking lot. "I never expected this," he said. "Never thought helping one person would bring so many others to help me. Maybe that's how good works. One person reaches out, then another, until there's too many to count." He paused, gathering strength. "Let's make something good out of this. Let's show them that love is stronger than hate." Amanda squeezed his shoulder gently. The setting sun painted everything in gold. The bikes, the leather, the tears on more than a few weathered faces. In that moment, the feared Hell's Angels looked more like guardian angels, their chrome reflecting the light like halos. Ruth Matthews looked out over the gathering, her initial fear replaced by something like wonder. These outlaws had done what the law wouldn't, stood up for what was right. She whispered a prayer of thanks, watching as the last sunlight turned her son's face golden, his spirit unbroken despite it all. The Mississippi sun rose hot and heavy the next morning, painting the hospital parking lot in shades of gold. Kevin sat on the edge of his bed, wincing as he pulled on a clean t-shirt Ruth had brought from home. His ribs protested every movement, and his face still bore the purple-yellow marks of hatred. "You sure about this, baby?" Ruth asked, hovering nearby with his discharge papers. "Can't hide forever, Mama," Kevin said softly. "Got work waiting." Amanda appeared in the doorway, her leather vest now adorned with a small crosspin she hadn't worn before. "Your chariot awaits, kid." She gestured to a wheelchair hospital policy required for discharge. Outside, 24 bikers had their machines idling, ready to escort Kevin home. The rumble of their engines drew hospital staff to the windows, and even a few patients wheeled themselves to watch. Kevin settled carefully into Ruth's old Buick, touched by how Amanda's crew flanked them like an honor guard all the way to the garage. The sight of his workspace made Kevin's heart sink. Tools lay scattered where the attackers had kicked them, and engine parts were strewn across the dirt yard. But before he could dwell on it, Amanda's voice rang out. "All right, people, let's get this shop back in shape." Her bikers moved with surprising efficiency, gathering tools, sweeping up broken glass, and organizing parts. Kevin watched from a folding chair, calling out where things belonged, amazed at how these strangers treated each piece of equipment with respect. Around mid-morning, movement at the edge of the property caught everyone's attention. 3 older men in veterans' caps approached cautiously, led by Mr. Johnson, who had served with Kevin's father. "Thought you might need some extra hands," Mr. Johnson said, nodding to Kevin. "Your daddy would have done the same." Behind them came a group of neighborhood kids on bicycles, wide-eyed at the spectacle of chrome and leather. Instead of chasing them away, Amanda's crew showed them how to polish motorcycle tanks and explained basic engine parts. "Hey, Amanda," Kevin called from his chair. "Bring that Harley over here. Might as well teach you something while I'm stuck sitting." Amanda wheeled her bike closer, and Kevin began pointing out the finer points of engine timing. His voice was gentle but sure, as he explained how each part worked together, how to listen for problems, how to coax the best performance from the machine. "You got the touch," Amanda said, watching his hands move carefully over the engine. "Like you're healing it or something." Kevin smiled. "Machines are honest. They don't care what color you are or what you look like. They just want to be treated right." Amanda was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the worn leather of her seat. "Had a son once," she said suddenly, her voice low enough that only Kevin could hear. "Joshua. He was good with his hands, too." Kevin waited, sensing there was more. "Found him in his room 3 years ago. Needle still in his arm." Amanda's voice cracked slightly. "I'd been clean 8 years by then. Thought I'd shown him a better way. But the darkness got him anyway." "I'm sorry," Kevin said softly. "The club saved me after that. Gave me purpose when I wanted to follow him down that road." She patted the bike's tank. "These machines, this family we built, it's all redemption, you know? Making something good out of the bad." They worked together through the afternoon, Kevin teaching and Amanda learning, their conversation flowing easily between technical tips and deeper truths. The veterans shared stories about Kevin's father, making him laugh despite his sore ribs. The kids hung on every word, especially when Amanda's crew demonstrated basic repairs. As evening approached, a different kind of visitor arrived. Reverend Thomas Gracie walked up the driveway, his collar wilting in the heat, a thoughtful expression on his face as he took in the scene. "Well now," he said, looking around at the unlikely gathering. "This is what I call a real revival." Kevin tried to stand to greet him, but the Reverend waved him back down. "Stay put, son. I just came to thank you." "Thank me?" Kevin asked, confused. "For showing us what faith in action looks like," Reverend Gracie said. "You know, I've been preaching about love overcoming hate for 20 years, but seeing it happen, seeing these walls come down right here in our town, that's something else entirely." He looked at the mixed group working together. Bikers, veterans, children, all focused on restoration, rather than destruction. "I've got an idea, if you're willing. What if we organized a unity ride through town? Show folks that love can be louder than hate?" Amanda had been listening quietly. Now she stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Kevin's shoulder. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had found her own redemption and was ready to share it. "Let's show them what redemption sounds like," she said, and the evening air seemed to hum with possibility. Kevin looked up at them both, the pastor and the biker, and saw the same light in their eyes. It was the light of purpose, of hope, of faith that good could overcome evil not through force, but through the patient work of healing what was broken. The morning sun cast long shadows across Kevin's garage as preparations for the Unity ride took shape. Amanda stood on a ladder, hanging a fresh "Fixing Heart's Garage" sign, while her crew bustled around the property. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from bikers across the country who had seen Kevin's story online. "Another 100 riders coming from Georgia," she called down to Kevin, who sat in a folding chair directing traffic. His bruises were fading to yellow, but his spirit glowed brighter than ever. Social media had transformed their quiet resistance into a movement. Videos of the Hells Angels standing guard at the hospital had gone viral, drawing comments from people nationwide about standing up to hatred. Local news stations picked up the story, their cameras capturing the unlikely sight of leather-clad bikers working alongside Kevin to restore his garage. But not everyone welcomed the change. Main Street store owners pulled their shutters down when Amanda's crew rode past. The diner that had served Kevin and Amanda breakfast now had a "closed for renovations" sign, though no work was being done. "Give them time," Kevin said, noticing Amanda's clenched jaw. "Fears like rust. Got to sand it away gentle-like." That Sunday morning, Ruth Matthews stood before the congregation at First Baptist, her hands steady on the pulpit despite her trembling voice. "My boy," she began, "was raised to believe in the light. When his daddy passed, I worried the darkness might take him, but Kevin chose to shine brighter." She paused, gathering strength. He fixes engines for widows who can't pay. He helps strangers stranded on dark roads. And when hatred knocked him down, he got back up asking how to help those who hurt him. The church sat silent, many heads bowed in shame or reflection. Reverend Gracie squeezed Ruth's shoulder as she returned to her pew. After the service, Mrs. Baker from the hardware store approached Ruth. "Tell Kevin we're donating supplies for his garage," she said softly. "It's time we fixed what's broken in this town." The movement grew like a wave. Amanda's network of bikers collected donations from across the South. Boxes of tools, spare parts, and even complete engines arrived daily. The local food bank, inspired by Kevin's example, began providing meals for the visiting riders. One night, well past midnight, Kevin knelt alone in his garage. The moonlight filtered through the tin roof's holes, creating patterns on the concrete floor. His whispered prayers filled the quiet space. "Lord, I didn't understand at first," he said, his voice barely audible. "When they hurt me, I thought maybe Mama was right about being too trusting. But you turned that pain into something beautiful. You sent angels in leather instead of wings." Outside, Amanda leaned against the doorframe, listening. Her weathered face softened as she watched the young man pray. She'd seen plenty of Sunday Christians in her time, quick to judge and slow to help. But Kevin lived his faith every day, turning wrenches and touching hearts with equal care. "Guess faith ain't just for Sunday folks," she whispered to herself, wiping away an unexpected tear. The next morning found them painting banners for the Unity Ride. Kevin sat in his chair, directing the design while Amanda and her crew worked. The garage buzzed with activity as more bikers arrived hourly. "Hey, Preacher Kev!" Amanda called out. Paint splattered across her leather vest. "This banner straight enough for you?" Kevin laughed, a full, genuine sound that echoed off the garage walls. It was his first real laugh since the attack, and the sound made everyone pause and smile. "Preacher Kev?" he chuckled. "I just fix engines, Amanda." "Nah," she replied, climbing down from the ladder. "You fix more than that. You fix hope." Throughout the day, the rumble of approaching motorcycles grew steadier. Local residents stood in their yards, watching as bikes from Tennessee, Alabama, and Louisiana rolled into town. Each new arrival brought stories of how Kevin's example had touched them, former gang members now mentoring youth, recovered addicts helping others find sobriety, veterans finding purpose in service. The thunder of engines became a constant background noise, like the heartbeat of something larger than themselves. Kevin sat in his chair, watching the endless stream of chrome and leather pour into his small town. Each rider brought not just support, but a piece of their own redemption story to share. Amanda stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder as they watched the arrivals. "Your daddy would be proud," she said quietly. "Real proud." Kevin nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The garage that had once been his sanctuary was becoming a beacon of hope for others. The pain of his beating was transforming into purpose, one rumbling motorcycle at a time. As the sun began to set, the sound of distant engines continued to grow. More riders were coming, drawn by the promise of something powerful happening in this small Mississippi town. They came not for revenge or confrontation, but to stand beside a young man who had chosen love over hate, healing over hurting. The day's last light caught the fresh paint on the Fixing Hearts Garage sign, making it glow like a promise. Tomorrow would bring the Unity Ride, but today had already shown that hearts, like engines, could be fixed with patience, faith, and the right tools. Dawn painted the Mississippi sky in shades of pink and gold as Kevin Matthews stood at his garage door, fingering the soft leather of a borrowed jacket. The morning air hummed with anticipation and the quiet murmur of hundreds of motorcycles being warmed up. "You ready, kid?" Amanda's voice carried across the lot. She stood beside her gleaming Harley, her weathered face proud and determined. Chrome sparkled in every direction as far as Kevin could see. A sea of bikes stretching down the street, American flags waving gently in the morning breeze. "Ready as I'll ever be," Kevin replied, his voice soft but steady. His injuries still ached, but today wasn't about pain. It was about healing. Amanda helped him onto her bike, careful of his healing ribs. "Remember," she said, "you don't have to say a word if you don't want to. Just being here is enough." The rumble of engines filled the air as hundreds of bikers prepared to move. Kevin caught sight of his mother on the porch, tears streaming down her face as she waved. Beside her stood Reverend Gracie, his hand raised in blessing. At exactly 9 o'clock, Amanda kicked her bike to life. The sound was like thunder, echoing off the buildings as she led the massive convoy forward. Kevin held tight, his heart pounding with emotion as they turned onto Main Street. The transformation of the town took his breath away. Church bells rang out from every steeple, their peals mixing with the rhythm of motorcycles. People lined the sidewalks, some cheering, others standing in respectful silence. Shop owners stood in their doorways, and children waved tiny American flags. As they passed Thompson's Auto Parts, Kevin saw Mr. Thompson himself, one of the men who'd always treated him with suspicion, remove his cap and bow his head. The gesture brought tears to Kevin's eyes. Outside the diner where he and Amanda had first shared breakfast, the entire staff stood waving. The waitress who'd called Amanda was crying openly, her hand over her heart. Even more moving were the faces Kevin recognized from that terrible night. Men who'd watched his beating without intervening, now standing with downcast eyes and slumped shoulders. Their shame was visible, but so was something else. The first glimpses of change. The parade of bikes wound through every major street, the roar of engines echoing off buildings like a battle cry for justice. But this wasn't a battle. It was a celebration of unity, of light overcoming darkness. At the community center, hundreds of bikes parked in neat rows as people gathered on the lawn. Someone had set up a small platform, and Amanda guided Kevin toward it. His legs shook slightly as he climbed the steps, but her steady hand on his elbow gave him strength. Looking out over the crowd, Kevin saw every shade of humanity. Leather-clad bikers stood shoulder to shoulder with church ladies in their Sunday best. Veterans in crisp uniforms mixed with teenagers in torn jeans. For once, the divisions that usually marked their town seemed to have melted away. When Kevin stepped up to the microphone, a hush fell over the gathering. He hadn't planned to speak, but the words came naturally, flowing from his heart. "I never wanted attention," he began softly. "All I ever wanted was to fix things, engines mostly. But somewhere along the way, I learned that the biggest things that need fixing aren't made of metal. They're made of heart and soul." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "What happened to me was born of fear and hatred. But look around you now. Look at what love can do. Look at how many people came together, not for revenge, but for healing." Amanda stood beside him, her usual tough demeanor softening as pride shone in her eyes. "This isn't about me," Kevin said. "It's about all of us. About choosing forgiveness over bitterness. About fixing what's broken. In our machines, in our town, in our hearts." The applause started slowly, then built like a wave until it drowned out even the memory of motorcycle engines. People were hugging, crying, reaching across old boundaries to shake hands. As the sun began its descent, the crowd gradually dispersed. Some bikers began their journeys home, while others accepted invitations to local homes for dinner. The day's unity had sparked countless connections that would last long after the engines fell silent. Kevin and Amanda found themselves back at his garage, sitting in old lawn chairs as the evening settled around them. Someone, Kevin suspected his mother, had left them a feast of fried catfish, hush puppies, and cold sweet tea. "Never thought I'd see the day," Amanda mused, biting into a piece of crispy fish. "Hell's Angels having dinner with church ladies, cops helping direct bike traffic, kids getting motorcycle rides from reformed gang members." Kevin smiled, watching fireflies begin their evening dance. Sometimes people just need a reason to be their better selves. The cicadas hummed their evening chorus, a peaceful backdrop to their quiet celebration. The leather jacket hung loose on Kevin's frame, but somehow it felt right, like a symbol of the unlikely family he'd found. They sat there as darkness gathered, sharing food and quiet laughter, their hearts full with the day's victories. The garage behind them stood as a testament to resilience, its new sign catching the last rays of sunlight. "Fixing Heart's Garage, all are welcome here." The night hung heavy over the small Mississippi town. Amanda tossed and turned in her motel bed, still wearing her leather vest. Something didn't feel right. The sweet triumph of the Unity ride felt too perfect, too easy. At 12 o'clock midnight, a harsh smell jolted her awake. Smoke. Not the friendly kind from barbecues or bonfires, but the acidic stench of destruction. She burst from her room, bare feet hitting the gravel. Her heart stopped. Across the street, Kevin's garage was wrapped in orange flames that licked the night sky. The tin roof glowed like molten metal. "Fire!" Amanda's roar shattered the silence. "Kevin's garage is burning!" Doors flew open along the motel strip as bikers poured out. Some were shirtless, others in pajamas, but all moved with urgent purpose. Amanda sprinted toward the inferno, her lungs burning from the smoke. "Form a line!" she bellowed. "Get buckets, hoses, anything!" The bikers fell into formation, creating a human chain from the nearest water source. Bucket after bucket passed hand to hand, a desperate attempt to tame the flames. But the fire was too hungry, too fierce. Local firefighters arrived with sirens wailing, but Amanda could see in their grim faces what she already knew. It was too late. The garage, Kevin's dream, his father's legacy, was beyond saving. Ruth's station wagon screeched into the yard. She stumbled out in her nightgown, a hand pressed to her mouth. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not this. Please, not this." Kevin arrived moments later, still wearing the borrowed leather jacket from the ride. He stood motionless, watching his life's work dissolve into ash. The flames reflected in his wet eyes, but he didn't make a sound. Amanda had seen that look before, in her own mirror, the night she lost her son. It was the face of someone watching their heart burn. The fire raged for hours, defying every attempt to control it. Tools melted, engines warped, dreams turned to cinders. The bikers worked tirelessly, but by dawn, only smoking ruins remained. Sheriff Harkins arrived as the sun crept over the horizon, his face drawn with concern. He walked the perimeter, noting the smell of gasoline, the broken window. "This wasn't an accident," he said quietly. Amanda's hands curled into fists. Rage bubbled in her chest, hot as the dying embers. "I'll find who did this," she growled. "Every biker in 3 states will hunt them down." But Kevin's hand touched her arm, gentle but firm. "We can't fight hate with fire," he whispered, his voice hoarse from smoke. "That's what they want. More darkness, more pain." Ruth wept beside him, clutching her son's arm. The bikers gathered around them in a protective circle, their usual rowdy energy replaced by stunned silence. In the distance, church bells began their morning song, the peaceful sound a stark contrast to the scene of destruction. News vans began arriving, reporters spilling out with microphones and cameras. They thrust microphones at Kevin's face, asking rapid-fire questions. Does this mean the Unity ride failed? Are you afraid? Will you rebuild? What message does this send to the community? Kevin looked at the ashes of his garage, then at the faces surrounding him. Bikers, neighbors, his mother, Amanda. He bent down and scooped up a handful of warm ashes. No, he answered quietly, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. The Unity ride didn't fail, it just began. The morning wind picked up, catching the ashes in Kevin's palm. They scattered into the dawn light, dancing like gray butterflies against the pink sky. Amanda watched them fly, understanding suddenly that some things had to burn before they could be reborn. Kevin stood in the ruins of his dream, shoulders straight, face lifted to the rising sun. The leather jacket still hung on his frame, now dusted with ashes, a symbol of destruction transformed into a badge of resilience. The church bells continued their song, ringing out over the scene of devastation. But in their sound was a promise, not of easy victories, but of hope that survives even the hottest flames. In the aftermath of the fire, the small Mississippi town simmered like a pot about to boil over. The acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Main Street had become a battlefield of whispers and sideways glances. "Those bikers brought this on us," muttered Mrs. Henderson outside the grocery store, loud enough for Amanda to hear as she passed by. "Our town was peaceful before they came." Others stood firmly in Kevin's corner. Old Mr. Johnson, the hardware store owner, posted a hand-painted sign in his window. "Standing with Kevin Matthews." The division cut deep, splitting families and longtime friends. Amanda's club transformed the empty field at the edge of town into a makeshift camp. Tents dotted the grass like strange metal and canvas flowers. Their bikes formed a protective perimeter around the Matthews home, chrome glinting in the summer sun. The bikers took shifts, watching for trouble, their presence both a comfort and a source of tension. Inside his mother's house, Kevin sat at the kitchen table, staring at his bandaged hands. Tools could be replaced, walls rebuilt, but something deeper had been shaken, his certainty that love could overcome hatred. "Maybe I was wrong, Mama," he whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Maybe trying to change things just makes everything worse." Ruth Matthews stood at the sink, her back straight as a church pew. She turned slowly, drying her hands on her apron. "Kevin Matthews, you listen to me now." She pulled out a chair and sat beside him, taking his calloused hands in hers. "Sometimes God lets something burn so something better can rise, like a forest after a wildfire. Looks like death at first. But that's where new life starts." Kevin closed his eyes, remembering the garage as it had been, the familiar smell of oil and metal, the radio playing gospel songs, the satisfaction of bringing dead engines back to life. Now, it was all ashes. Outside, Amanda paced the front yard like a sentinel, her leather vest reflecting the setting sun. She watched Kevin through the window, seeing his shoulders shake with silent sobs. It stirred something in her she thought had died with her son, a fierce, maternal need to protect. As night fell, Kevin slipped out of the house. Amanda watched him climb into his old truck, its engine coughing to life. She knew where he was headed, the weathered white church on Old Mill Road, where his father had once preached. Without hesitation, she swung onto her Harley and followed at a distance, headlight off. The country church stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky, its steeple reaching up like a finger pointing to heaven. Kevin's truck sat in the gravel parking lot, empty. Amanda killed her engine and dismounted silently. The church door creaked as she approached. Through it, she could see Kevin kneeling at the altar, his head bowed. The moonlight filtering through the stained glass windows cast colored shadows across his face. "Lord," his voice carried softly through the empty church. "I thought I knew your plan. Thought if I just showed enough love, kept enough faith." He paused, wiping his eyes. "But now I don't know. Everything I built is gone. Maybe I was foolish to think one person could make a difference." Amanda stood in the doorway, tears rolling down her weathered cheeks. This man, barely older than her son would have been, carried a weight that would have crushed most spirits. Yet here he was, still seeking, still believing. "But if you can still use me," Kevin continued, his voice growing stronger, "if there's still something good that can come from this, Lord, use me if you still can. Show me the way forward." The night hours passed like water. Amanda remained at her post, watching over Kevin as he prayed, her own heart opening to something she'd long forgotten. The tough biker queen who feared nothing found herself whispering her own prayers into the darkness. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the sun's rays pierced through the stained glass windows. The colored light spilled across the altar, bathing Kevin in shades of gold and ruby. He remained kneeling, his face peaceful now, transformed by the long night of wrestling with his faith. Amanda watched the light play across his features, remembering something her grandmother used to say: "Gold ain't worth nothing till it's been through the fire." Maybe, she thought, the same was true of faith. The morning light grew stronger, filling the small church with warmth and color. Kevin remained still, surrounded by the holy glow, his shadow stretching long behind him, like a reminder of the darkness that had brought him to this moment of light. A week passed, like a slow summer breeze. Amanda sat in the local diner, her laptop open beside a half-empty coffee cup. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she reached out to every biker club from Mississippi to California. The waitress, Mary Beth, kept refilling her cup without asking, still grateful for how the bikers had stood up for Kevin. "Listen up, family," Amanda typed in the group message. "One of our own needs help. Remember that mechanic in Mississippi who fixed my Harley? Some cowards burned down his garage. Time to show him what brotherhood really means." The responses flooded in within hours. Bikers pledged money from their savings. Others promised tools, lumber, and their own 2 hands for the work. Amanda's eyes grew misty as she scrolled through message after message of support. "Got a truck full of power tools heading your way from Texas? Count me and my crew in from Louisiana. We do construction work. Setting up a GoFundMe page right now." Outside the diner, more bikes rolled into town each day. Some riders came from as far as Oregon, their leather vests dusty from the road. They set up camp in the field behind Kevin's mother's house, a sea of tents and motorcycles growing larger by the day. On Wednesday morning, Sheriff Dale Harkins pulled up in his patrol car. This time, he didn't swagger or avoid eye contact. He walked straight up to Kevin, who was sorting through the few tools they'd salvaged from the ashes. "Kevin," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "I failed you before. Let me make it right." He cleared his throat. "I've got 20 deputies willing to help rebuild on their off days, and the county's fast-tracking all the permits you'll need." Kevin looked up from his work, studying the sheriff's face. He saw something new there, humility, maybe even shame. He stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Sheriff. We could use the help." Inside Ruth's kitchen, Kevin spread out paper across the table, sketching plans for the new garage. His pencil moved with purpose as Amanda watched over his shoulder. "See here?" Kevin pointed to a section of the drawing. "We'll make this part a classroom. Kids can learn basic mechanics, maybe find a trade that'll keep them off the streets." His eyes sparkled with renewed purpose. And over here, a computer lab for job training. Amanda squeezed his shoulder. You're building more than a garage, Kevin. You're building hope. The work began in earnest. Contractors who'd heard the story donated their time to pour concrete and frame walls. Church ladies arrived with casseroles stacked in their arms, feeding the hungry workers. The air filled with the sound of hammers and saws, punctuated by laughter and friendly shouts. Local children came after school, eager to help however they could. They painted bright signs with careful letters. We stand with Kevin, and love wins, and everyone welcome here. The signs lined the fence, a colorful reminder of community support. Ruth moved among the workers like an angel, passing out cold water and words of encouragement. She watched her son direct the project with quiet authority, seeing so much of his father in him now. Late one afternoon, Amanda disappeared without explanation. She returned at sunset, driving a rental truck, a huge rolled-up banner in the back. "Kevin," she called out, "got something for you." The workers gathered as Amanda and two bikers unfurled the banner. Kevin's breath caught in his throat as he read the words painted in bold, proud letters. Kevin's place. "This ain't just a garage anymore," Amanda said, her voice rough with emotion. "It's a landmark, a symbol. People are gonna know this is where hope lives." Kevin pulled Amanda into a tight hug, his eyes wet with tears. "You're family now," he whispered. "God sent you to me like an angel in leather." Amanda laughed through her own tears, punching his arm gently. "Don't you go getting soft on me now, preacher boy." As the sun sank below the horizon, someone strung up lights between the half-finished walls. They swayed in the evening breeze like stars come down to earth. The workers gathered in a circle, bikers, deputies, church ladies, children, all holding hands. Kevin stood in the center, next to the fresh concrete foundation. "Lord," he prayed, his voice carrying in the quiet dusk, "thank you for turning our mourning into dancing. Thank you for bringing light from darkness. Bless this place and everyone who helped build it. Let it stand as proof that love is stronger than hate." "Amen," the crowd responded, their voices rising together into the purple evening sky. The wet concrete gleamed under the string lights, still fresh, still setting. Tomorrow it would be solid enough to build upon, a new foundation for more than just a building. It was a foundation for healing, for change, for a community finding its way back to what mattered most. Amanda watched Kevin talking with some of the workers, his face animated as he described his vision for the place. She smiled, thinking how sometimes the strongest hearts were the gentlest ones, and how sometimes it took losing everything to find what you were meant to build. The morning of the grand reopening dawned clear and bright, as if heaven itself had polished the sky for the occasion. Kevin stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. His mother, Ruth, came up behind him, smoothing his collar. "You look just like your daddy," she whispered, her eyes misty. "He would be so proud today." Outside, the new building gleamed in the morning light. The fresh paint sparkled, and the sign, "Kevin's Place," caught the sun like a beacon. The parking lot, newly paved, started filling early. Motorcycles rolled in first, hundreds of them, chrome flashing, followed by cars and trucks from all over the county. Amanda directed traffic with authority, her leather vest catching the light. She'd spent the morning setting up chairs, making sure everything was perfect for Kevin's moment. The local news vans arrived, reporters testing their microphones and adjusting their cameras. By 10 o'clock, the crowd had swelled to over 300 people. They mingled together, leather-clad bikers chatting with church ladies in their Sunday best, veterans in pressed uniforms standing alongside teenagers in bright t-shirts. The mayor arrived in his dark suit, nodding respectfully to Amanda as she showed him to his seat. The local gospel choir, dressed in royal blue robes, arranged themselves near the podium. Reverend Gracie stood nearby, his Bible tucked under his arm, beaming at the diverse crowd before him. Kevin watched from inside, his heart pounding. Through the window he could see faces he'd known all his life, mixed with new friends who'd come from across the country. Some had helped rebuild, others had sent donations, and still others had simply shown up to stand with him. "You ready?" Amanda appeared beside him, her usual gruffness softened by emotion. "I think so," Kevin replied, touching the speech in his pocket. "Just hope I can get through it without crying." Amanda squeezed his shoulder. "Ain't nothing wrong with tears when they come from a full heart." At exactly 11 o'clock, Reverend Gracie stepped to the microphone. The crowd fell quiet. Hundreds of faces turned expectantly toward the stage. "Today," the Reverend began, "we celebrate more than just the opening of a business. We celebrate the triumph of love over hate, of light over darkness, of forgiveness over vengeance." Kevin walked onto the stage, and the crowd erupted in applause. He stood at the podium, taking in the sea of faces before him. The cameras rolled, red lights blinking. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and clear. "A few months ago, I stood in ashes, wondering if my dream was dead. But God had other plans. He sent me angels, some wearing leather, some wearing badges, some wearing church hats." This drew gentle laughter from the crowd. "To those who tried to stop us with fists and fire," Kevin continued, his voice growing stronger, "I want you to know something. I don't know your names, but I pray for your peace, because hate already lost." He paused, letting the words sink in. It lost the moment this community chose love instead. It lost when strangers became family. It lost when we refused to let darkness have the final word. The crowd fell completely silent, hanging on every word. Even the reporters lowered their microphones, caught up in the moment. "This place isn't just mine," Kevin gestured to the building behind him. "It belongs to all of us. It's a promise that there's always hope, that broken things can be fixed, that love is stronger than fear." As he finished speaking, the silence held for a moment before the crowd burst into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and wiping tears from their eyes. Amanda made her way onto the stage, carrying something in her hands. Her usual tough demeanor cracked as she faced Kevin. "Kid," she said, her voice rough with emotion, "you taught us all something about courage and grace." She held up her leather vest, the same one she'd worn thousands of miles across the country. "This belongs to you now." The crowd hushed as Amanda draped the vest over Kevin's shoulders. He looked down, touching the patches reverently. There, newly sewn onto the leather, was a special patch that read, "Hell's Angel, Honorary Brother." "You earned this," Amanda said softly, pulling him into a fierce hug. "You're family now, forever." The moment was broken by the sound of church bells pealing across town. As if on cue, the gospel choir began to sing, their voices rising pure and strong in the morning air. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Kevin closed his eyes, remembering how that same song had played on his radio the night he lay beaten in the dirt. But now, surrounded by love and support, the words held new meaning. They spoke not of defeat, but of triumph, not of endings, but of beautiful beginnings. The choir's voices soared higher, joined now by many in the crowd. "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." Ruth stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son. Amanda remained beside Kevin on stage, her hand on his shoulder, both of them surrounded by the swell of music and the tangible presence of grace. The song filled the air, carried by hundreds of voices, bikers and churchgoers, young and old, black and white, all singing together under the bright Mississippi sun. It was more than just a hymn. It was a declaration that love had won, that hope had prevailed, that amazing grace had indeed transformed their little corner of the world. The autumn breeze carried the sound of laughter and clanking tools through the open doors of Kevin's place. 6 weeks after the grand opening, the garage had transformed into something far more than just a repair shop. It had become the beating heart of the community. Inside, teenagers clustered around a lifted pickup truck, their eyes wide as Kevin demonstrated how to check the transmission fluid. "See how it catches the light?" he explained, holding up the dipstick. "That tells you more than just the level. It tells you the story of what's happening inside." Across the workspace, Amanda stood at the welding station, her leather vest now adorned with a teacher's badge. 3 young apprentices watched intently as she demonstrated proper technique, her steady hands guiding the torch with precision. "You gotta respect the metal," she called out over the sparks. "Just like you gotta respect each other." The smell of fresh cornbread and chicken wafted from the small kitchen area where church ladies served hot meals to anyone who walked through the doors. Miss Betty, the oldest deaconess, insisted on feeding every person who came in, whether they could pay or not. "Jesus didn't charge for those loaves and fishes," she'd say with a wink. Sheriff Harkins pulled up in his cruiser every Saturday morning, trading his badge for a work apron. Today, he was teaching a group of kids how to change oil, his face lit with genuine joy. The same man who once looked the other way now looked everyone in the eye, greeting each person by name. "Coffee's fresh," Ruth called out from behind the counter she'd set up. She'd turned one corner into a gathering spot where mechanics and customers could sit and talk over hot drinks and her famous pecan bars. Her pride in what Kevin had built shone in every smile she gave. Amanda had surprised everyone by renting an apartment in town. "Roads'll always be there," she'd said when her club asked why she was settling down. "But some journeys ain't about miles." She'd found her calling, teaching troubled teens the skills that had once saved her own life. On Sunday mornings, the garage transformed into an unconventional church. Kevin never planned to preach, but somehow it happened naturally. People just started gathering, drawn by his simple wisdom and genuine faith. This particular Sunday, he stood beside a gleaming Harley, his hands still slightly greasy from a morning repair. "You know," he began, gesturing to the engine, "I've been thinking about how engines and hearts ain't so different. Both run better when loved, both need regular maintenance, and both can be fixed no matter how broken they seem." The crowd nodded, a mix of leather vests and Sunday dresses, all listening intently. Ruth stood in the doorway, sunlight catching the tears in her eyes as she watched her son. Her prayers had been answered in ways she never could have imagined. "See, when an engine knocks," Kevin continued, "it's telling you something's wrong. Same with a heart. The trick is listening. And the healing? That comes from caring enough to do the work." He patted the motorcycle's tank. "Every machine in here has a story of being broken and made new, just like every one of us." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the garage doors, Kevin and Amanda prepared for their evening ride, a tradition they'd started to mark the end of each week. The new sign above the garage caught the golden light, its letters gleaming, "Love fixes everything." They mounted their bikes, Kevin on his father's restored Triumph, Amanda on her trusty Harley. The engines rumbled to life, a sound that once sparked fear in town but now represented healing. Side by side, they rode through the streets they'd helped transform. Children waved from porches, shop owners nodded in greeting. The evening air carried the scent of magnolia blossoms and fresh-cut grass. Kevin glanced up at the purpling sky, his heart full of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered into the wind, "for fixing me too." The words were lost in the gentle rumble of their engines, but their truth echoed in every mile they rode. Behind them, music and laughter spilled from the open doors of Kevin's place, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. The garage lights glowed warm and welcoming, promising that broken things, whether engines or hearts, could always find healing within its walls. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.